I spoke recently with Stefan Freund, who is professor of composition at the University of Missouri in Columbia, also known as Mizzou, and he's the artistic director of the Mizzou New Music Initiative. Stefan is also a cellist and a founding member of a new music band that I am a fan of called Alarm Will Sound. In fact, that's how I first got to know him because Alarm Will Sound has a performing presence in St. Louis, where I performed for many years. One of the things he does is he brings student composers from Mizzou to the St. Louis Symphony to have their works workshopped and then ultimately performed. And so Stefan is a pretty big deal in the world of new music. And I wanted to talk to him and find out about the kind of things he thinks about when he composes and when he teaches students of composition. Here's my conversation with Stefan. So, Stefan Freund, thank you for coming and talking with me. This is really great because I got to know you a little bit because of this thing that's happened in St. Louis where this new music band called Alarm Will Sound started playing there, and I first heard Alarm at the Mizzou. Correct me about the name of it, International Composers Festival. I think it's something like that. And I was floored. And then you're coming to St. Louis, and you were there like 3 or 4 times a year. And so I got to know you a little bit and the band. And so why don't we start there and just talk about this new music thing, the band, and what's going on at Mizzou?
Yeah, well, first, I really appreciate you coming out to our shows. It's great to have your support as a member of St. Louis Symphony being there and kind of spreading the word and the gospel of Alarmable Sound. And I thank you for having me today. So the programs of the Mizzou New Music Initiative are something that have developed almost over the past 20 years. It began very small with what we call the Creating Original Music Project, COMP, which is a K through 12 composition competition for Missouri students. We have a call for scores. We judge those compositions, and the winners' pieces are performed in a festival every April at Mizzou. So it's really great for these young composers to have an opportunity to meet each other and have their music played. Then that developed into a summer composition workshop. And as our donor, Dr. Gene Sinkfield saw all the activities that we were doing and really the work that we were doing to really promote new music and composers' music. She wanted to do more. And she started having conversations with people all over the country about how she could build a program to really establish the University of Missouri and the state of Missouri as a center for new music. She claims that she spoke to over 100 people about this. And at the end, she spoke to my colleague, Dr. Tom McKinney, and myself about what we wanted at the University of Missouri. And that in 2009, 2010 began the programs of the Mizzou New Music Initiative. Those included a fully funded new music ensemble, which is flute, clarinet, violin, cello, percussion, piano. So these are all master's students who get full scholarships to play in the ensemble. And of course, our priority is promoting the music of Mizzou student composers, faculty, and also guest composers, that we also play famous composers' music. And another big part of that was, as you mentioned, the Mizzou International Composers Festival. So as we developed this new music initiative, we thought about top-down ways that we could promote music in Missouri as well as bottom-up. So we had comp, which obviously kindergarten through 12 student composers, you can't get any more grassroots than that. One of Gene's slogans is finding and growing composers. So we find those composers at a very young age, and then we provide opportunities. But at the same time, we wanted to have established composers, established ensembles come to Mizzou and spread the word about what we're doing. So the MICF, the Mizzou International Composers Festival, features 2 guest composers. We've had a number of Pulitzer Prize winners, Chicago Symphony Orchestra, resident composers, people who have written operas for the Met, the highest level of composers. And then we also have 8 resident composers who are mid-career composers, maybe slightly out of school, maybe still in school. And Alarmal Sound is the resident ensemble for that. So that concert that you saw was us performing 8 world premieres by these 8 composers that were selected from all over the world. We just had our applications come in for next year's MICF. We had over 600 applications for these 8 spots because composers really want to work with Alarmable Sound and they want to work with these guest composers. Next year, there'll be Hilda Paredes, who's a Mexican composer now active in Europe, and also Judd Greenstein, who's a composer based in New York and runs some concert series there. So our other programs, of course, we have guest composers, we have guest performers come in. We just had Hub New Music a couple weeks ago. They were absolutely fantastic. We've had a who's who of groups in the past: Jack Quartet, Eighth Blackbird, Roomful of Teeth, So Percussion, Third Coast Percussion, um, and even Quatuor Diotima from France as an international group that we've had. And we've also had collaborations which give opportunities to our students to write music for professional musicians. So we have a collaboration with the Sheldon Concert Hall in St. Louis, where 4 or 5 of our composers every year write a piece. That concert series is now run by the symphony. So those pieces are premiered by members of the St. Louis Symphony. And we also have a collaboration with the St. Louis Symphony. I just came back from St. Louis yesterday. We had 3 Mizzou students, 2 undergraduates and 1 graduate student, who wrote fabulous works for orchestra. Those pieces were read this fall and they'll be performed in the spring. So they get this recording that we made yesterday and really have the opportunity to examine what they've done, revise it, and then have a really quality performance in the spring. We have a lot of other programs. We have Missouri Composers Orchestra Project, where my orchestra, the Civic Orchestra, premieres pieces by Missouri composers. Yeah, I'm probably forgetting. Oh, we have student grants, faculty grants for writing. And again, these programs have really made the University of Missouri a destination for students and composers.
Absolutely a mecca, I think.
Yeah.
A really amazing thing for a city that's it's kind of where's Columbia? It's in the
Yeah.
middle of the state. It's halfway between St. Louis and Kansas City, and it's actually a really a destination. So um, let me ask you about with all of this going on, and you're the director, so you have you're tied in with all the details and decisions to make and all of that stuff. You still compose, you find time to compose and
Yeah.
perform and teach. So I want to ask you about how all of this has influenced you as a composer. Because I've heard your music, it sounds, it's always like a breath of fresh air because I hear you allowing influences from all over the place coming into your music. And that is so different from the short time that I studied composition, where if I wrote anything that had a remote resemblance to functional tonality, I was like, I got a bad grade.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that taught you.
yeah. So, but how has this influenced you as a composer?
Yeah, I think the most important aspect of that is that I'm a performer of new music. So I play all kinds of different music. Of course, as a cellist growing up, I played all of the established repertoire, chamber music, solo repertoire, concertos, orchestral rep, and I loved all of it. I just have a ravenous appetite for the music. And then my father's a composer too, and my dad has always been an eclectic composer, always embraced a variety of styles, and was never intimidated by you need to write in this style or you need to do that. He's literally done his music really spans modernism to tonality and all the techniques in between. And I think as a performer, I really believe that there are so many different ways that you can express yourself through music because we've seen that through history and we see it in performers playing too. I was just listening to a couple things yesterday that blew my mind. the Netherlands Bach Society performance of a Bach cantata and the performance practice. And then I also saw Gardner conducting this production of Don Giovanni as part of the Holland Festival. And it's just amazing all the things you can do with music. Those are two different styles of music, Baroque and classical. But even in that, say, 50, 70 years of change, there's just so much variety in expression and what you can do with dynamics, articulation, these things. And of course, over the past 250 years since then, there are a whole wealth of things that have come, instrumentation, techniques, expression, tonality. And I really see those as a palette, a limitless palette that that I can call upon to express my music and give performers an opportunity to play.
Wow. Wow. So as a teacher, because that's another thing that you do. I mean, that's you're at a university that's primarily, well, you think I'm there to teach. And when I'm sure you are attracting great students. I remember just a couple of years ago, there was one of your students who had a piece performed on the St. Louis Symphony subscription concert. This
Yeah.
was after I left the orchestra and I had heard the broadcast, and my mind was blown. Uh, what a great piece that was! And
Yeah.
you'll have to remind me the
That
comp.
was Oswald Wynn's Giadine, which it has been performed really throughout the country now. It's been a big hit, and that was a product of this Mizzou St. Louis Symphony Orchestra collaboration. He wrote the piece. This was coming right out of COVID. I believe it was 20 fall of 21. Yeah, it must have been fall of 21. And I remember we're all wearing masks, we're in this room and a great performance of the piece. And then he really tweaked it between that time and the spring. And the conductor, Stephanie Childers, fell in love with it. She was also had Vietnamese heritage, just like Oswald. So she became a champion of the piece. So just a great story and a wonderful piece too.
Wow, yeah. So with all of this abundance of compositional talent, talk about, if you would, how do you direct your students? Because you want them to find their voice, their voices, and you want them to succeed in the world. It seems to me that success is partially, at least, you get people to listen to your music. So how do you guide them that way?
Yeah, so my fundamental role in teaching students is to help them express themselves the best way they can. So that could mean changing some notes around, changing a harmony, but lots of times it's timing, expression, instrumentation, techniques. How can you say what you're saying in an even more impactful way? How can you? Roger Kaza said a great thing about the horn concerto that I wrote for him. He said, "At this moment, we want the audience to lean in." And I feel like I'd never heard that term lean in before. And when I'm working with my students, I'm always thinking about how can we write music that captures the audience's attention and causes them to lean in. And of course, not lose that attention too. So how can we draw them in and how can we keep that attention? And there are a variety of ways of doing that, all the parameters of music. But I take my knowledge of and experience of music and I try to share ideas with them. Well, what if you did this? What if you did that? What if you listen to this piece as reference and see if that speaks to you, if there are some ideas you can take from that? So yeah, that's really my goal is to help them express because the teachers that I had that were most effective, they didn't try to change my style or point me in another direction. It was about making my music more effective.
Ah, wow. That sounds like support is
Yes.
providing the place for the student to grow into a more mature composer is seems like should be the goal of every teacher of every topic.
Mm.
Um, um, well, so I had an experience with one of your students who I actually commissioned to write a piece for me, and he used a lot of technology. He wrote a little program in Max and a programming environment that I had worked in occasionally, and was it was quite fun. But do you encounter that from your students? Is that a common thing, or is that in your own repertoire of?
Yeah, I have lots of students that use technology in various ways. One way that I think is really effective is I've had students that create mock-ups in a digital audio workstation. So they take samples and rather than notating the music first, they create the sound file first and then transcribe what they've created. This is something that I've actually done with Alarmable Sound. We take pieces of electronica and then transcribe them. So that's something that when I had this student that did that, and I've had some others as well, I was really excited about that and promoted that because I think it's a great way to realize music. We composers have musical ideas in their minds. They use notation to express those ideas. Then performers take that notation. They try to communicate that to the audience. So, whatever best way you can get that communication through the performers to the audience is the best way. So it could be notation, it could be chord symbols, could be graphic notation, lots of ways to express that. But if you have a real tangible idea, like I said, this work up in a mock up in a digital audio workstation, that's really great. Now, of course, working with electronics has been a big part of new music. And we just had a concert, new music ensemble concert, where we premiered three student works with electronics. So there were for performers and electronics. Some of the electronics were already fixed media, and some were live electronics, where, as you mentioned, max patches were responding with reverb or other effects to what was being played. So yeah, we definitely encourage our students to use technology. Again, what is your musical voice? Personally, I don't use electronics in my music because that's not something that I'm really hearing, at least right now, when I write music. Certainly, there's some electronic music influence behind what I do in orchestration. I would say we see that in the music of spectral composers, Sariaho, for example, where they're trying to create an almost electronic effect. Even the music of John Adams uses synthesizer a lot, right? So there's some integration there, even in an ensemble. I would think, oh, that's an acoustic ensemble. Uh, but yeah, I haven't done much with electronics myself, at least since I've been out of school.
Uh-huh, yeah. Well, um, so tell me what's coming up. I mean, you just had the big Freund at 50 kind of, I don't know, mid-career retrospective, or I don't,
Yes, that's
whatever
a
you would
great way to
call
put
it.
it.
And
Yeah.
Alarm Will Sound is doing stuff. What's coming up for you?
Yeah, I have a number of projects that are being talked about right now. Another Leo Seguin, who played my sax piece "Screams and Grooves" on a concert Saturday after my friend said, "Oh, we have to have a Seguin at 60 concert," and he wants a sax concerto for sax and wind ensemble. So that's something that I'd really like to do. I'm in talks with I don't know how much I should say about some of these in progress works. Maybe I won't give details. I'm in conversations with a person who writes children's books and maybe writing a piece for St. Louis Symphony and narrator using her book. And what's the other project I was thinking of recently? Oh, I'm also kind of, bouncing around the idea of an opera eventually, especially at this 50-year-old crossroads. My mom asked me, "What would you like to do?" And I was like, "Well, I haven't done an opera. Everybody does an opera, right?" Now, I've done oratorios and I've done pieces for narrator and ensemble. So I've certainly done pieces that are kind of like operas, or maybe even today would be called operas, but nothing with sets and scenes and acting. I think that's the big difference between the works that I've done up until this point to something that I would do in the future.
Wow, fantastic, fantastic. I'm going to ask you a question kind of in a little different vein because I like to promote good music, and one of the ways I'm trying to do that is by being a music publisher. And do you
Mhm.
ever talk to your students, or how do you think about that? Because I mean, a long time ago, a composer would get a deal with a publisher, and they would put it on paper, and people would walk in and buy it, and it's completely different now. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you think about that?
I've got a great story about that because my first year at Eastman, I think it was the fall of '97, we had a comp seminar. Joe Schwantner comes in, he talks about his website, and everyone's going to have a website. And I have my music on a website. And I was like, that's crazy. Who's ever going and of course, today, everyone has a website, everyone has their music up on their website. It's something we really talk to our students about today. Maybe not 10, 15, 20 years ago, but music entrepreneurship is a huge part of music education today. So we have an entrepreneurship program. We have classes in budgeting and grants and, of course, design, web design. So yeah, we try to encourage our students to promote themselves. We're very fortunate at the University of Missouri to have Mizzou New Music Initiative website, YouTube channel, web page. We also have a publicity firm that works with us to get articles out. So we're doing a lot of work for our students, but of course they have to do a lot of promotion themselves. Some of our students do self-publishing, some, especially, there's so many different worlds in music today. There's a band world, a choral world. I mentioned opera, that's kind of its own world too. The orchestral world is even different than the chamber world. There's just so many different dimensions to what's going on. So different composers working in each one of those realms it treats publishing differently. If you're a choral composer and the director needs 100 copies of your score, a publisher makes a lot of sense for that. Just send out all those scores. It's taken care of. Um, if you're writing a lot of orchestral music and you're working with professional symphonies, they're used to that model of renting the music and having it come in. Chamber music, everyone's using iPads now. I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating that, but I know the chamber groups that I've seen recently, they're reading scores off of iPads, not even parts, because they
Yes.
want to see what everyone else is doing. And I am so impressed by that. It blows me away.
Well, yes, it creates such an efficiency too in
Yeah.
rehearsing, and I'm familiar with that, and I applaud it. Well,
So that makes sense to just do PDFs and sell them on your website, or publisher doesn't really make sense to a rental doesn't really make sense for that. So um, you have to figure out what works best for, and maybe even different pieces you handle differently. You publish these pieces, you self-publish these pieces, you have this piece available for free, just so you can get your music out and get your name out. And then recording, that I kind of stuck on the music, but YouTube, Spotify. My daughter actually, she recorded a song and just put it up on Spotify, Apple Music, all these things, and it's amazing how easily you can disseminate your music now.
yeah, yeah. Well, Stefan Freund, this is a wonderful conversation. I learned so many things that I didn't know, and I'm really happy to reconnect with you in this way. And so, thank you. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Would love to. Thanks for having me, Tim. Appreciate it.